All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Mind the Mental Mondays. I hope you all enjoyed your Labor Day weekend last weekend. I hope that everybody did something that benefited your mental health. I hope you got some rest. I hope you did something fun. I hope you did something that just lifted your spirit. And that's what we like to do here on Mind the Mental Mondays. We know that we talk a lot about a topic that's very important. We talk about depression and we talk about mental health, but mental health is health. So one point of these Mind the Mental Mondays is that mental health is it's not doom and gloom. Mental health means you're taking care of yourself. It means you're taking care of your mind, which helps you to take care of your body. So with that said, I'm very excited tonight because I have a very special guest with me who is my dear sister and friend, Michelle Thornhill. I'm going to give a full introduction in just a moment. But before we get started, I just want to remind everyone of who I am. I'm Reverend Benita Weathers. And as I say every week, I like to give this caveat every single week that I am not a licensed mental health professional. However, I am an advocate and I do have a background in health education and research. And so I am well equipped to talk about the topic. And I also have family members who battle depression. So one of my reasons for starting Mind the Mental Mondays really was to cater in some ways to caregivers or loved ones of people with depression, or people who are caregivers for others who might express mental health challenges, for this to be a community where we can share, where we can uplift one another, where we can just recognize that there is hope, and that we can all benefit from just being there for one another, and also letting you know that it's important to take care of your own mental health as well. So when you're caring for your loved ones, it's important that you also take time to care for you. Put that saving mask, that oxygen mask on yourself first, before you can put it on somebody else. So with that said, we've got really a packed a session tonight that I'm excited about. The topic tonight was actually one that one of my listeners was interested in hearing about. And so if you have a topic that is related to mental health that you are interested in having discussed, please put it in the comments. Also, put in the comments where you're listening from. I want to hear from you. And I want to know if the material that's being shared, if it's beneficial to you. I want to know where you're coming from. So please put all of that in the chat. Communicate with us. We want to hear from you. All right. So tonight, our topic tonight is coping with the grief of losing a parent. And so I want to introduce my good friend and sister. We've known each other. I don't know. How long have we known each other now, Michelle?
I don't know.
It's been, let's just say it's been a few years that we've been connected. And I'm so happy to have met with her. We worked together in the International Association of Women. And we just formed a sisterhood and I love her. So I'm so glad. Thank you so much, Michelle, for agreeing to come on with your level of expertise. So let me give I'm going to give the formal introduction because I want you to know that she knows her stuff. She comes very and highly qualified. And I want you to know that. So Michelle Thornhill is a graduate of Eastern University and the founder and CEO of Legacy and Hope LLC. Remember that, Legacy and Hope LLC, a boutique company that helps individuals and organizations with grief, loss, bereavement, and end-of-life care. She is vice president of the National End-of-Life Doula Alliance NEDA, where she has served as a member of the board of directors since 2020 while chairing the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. Michelle is an instructor for the University of Vermont Larner College of Medicine's End-of-Life Doula Professional Certificate Program, and also works as an end-of-life doula and an advanced certified grief specialist, using a systems-based approach and action programs to lead one-on-one and group sessions, retreats, seminars, and workshops for individuals, organizations, and companies. Michelle is a collaborator with the University of Alabama Embodiment, Communication, and Health Living Justice Project, a certified trauma healing facilitator, a hospice volunteer, a sought-after speaker, a consultant, and a trusted professional called on to assist communities in crisis. Michelle takes pride in her commitment as a member of the advisory board for Girls Leading Africa and as a member of the advisory council for Greater Hope Medical Center. She is also proud of her dedication to former roles such as managing director of historic cemeteries, Philadelphia chapter president for the International Association of Women, where she was a fabulous leader. And family readiness program instructor for the U.S. Army. Michelle firmly believes that individuals can reach a level of satisfaction when given specific tools to maneuver their way through 3 transitions: moving beyond the pain that comes with grief and loss, living their best life, and preparing for the inevitable. When Michelle is not working, which I don't know when that is, she enjoys making jewelry, reading and learning American Sign Language and Latin dance. Whew. That's making me want to dance. That's something we can do that for our mental health. There's something about a Latin beat. I don't know about anybody else, but when I hear a Latin beat come on, I'm ready. So Michelle, you're gonna have to show me some moves.
I'm still learning them, but you're definitely welcome to anything that I already know.
All right, well, I'm gonna hold you to that.
Okay.
So to start off our conversation, I have several questions, but we're going to have a conversation, and my team will also be, if there are any questions that come up, if you have any questions for Michelle, please put them in the comments, and my team will make sure that we get them so that Michelle can answer any questions that you might have. All right, so let's get started, Michelle, with the conversation. So as we read in your bio, you have quite a bit of experience and expertise in working with people who experience grief and loss. And we know that grief and loss really can impact our mental health. And so what are some emotions or challenges that come up often when someone loses a parent specifically?
Oh, emotions and challenges that come up. The reality is that, well, when you're dealing with grief, it's the normal and natural reaction to loss of any kind. And when you think about it being part of a normal and natural reaction, it has an effect on not only the physical body, the emotional body, but our mental capacity as well. So some of the things that a person would experience when they're experiencing loss, which there's over 40 different losses that can trigger grief. And when you're experiencing grief, it's caused by conflicting feelings that come up. And those feelings come up when there's a change in a familiar pattern of behavior, right? You used to wake up every morning and call your parent, or you're used to picking them up and taking them to the grocery store. There's so many different experiences that we have when we're dealing with loss. And when I say that there's 40 plus different types of loss that can bring about grief, notice that I didn't use the word trigger, because we no longer really use that word. Some people still use it, but we really have gotten away from using that word because of the sensitivities that we experience, or some have experienced due to gun violence.
Mm,
So we're no longer using that word. But the impact of grief can be due to so many things. Not everyone that loses a parent necessarily loses a parent to death. So the death of a parent can be described as the feelings of reaching out for someone who has always been there, only to discover when you're reaching out for them one next time that they're no longer there for you, right? How many times have we had that experience where we want to share some news, good news, need some encouragement? The first thing that we do is pick up the telephone, or we remember that this person is no longer with us. And especially if it's a parent, the first thing when when you're feeling bad, or when you're feeling happy, you reach out to call your parents most of the time.
mhm,
Now, that's a parent that you can count on. That's a parent that you're used to reaching out to.
yeah.
But what if the case was different? Another feeling that a person may have is when their parent wasn't there for them. So that's still a measure of loss that people really don't consider, but they feel it,
Mm,
right? So, for example, the loss of a parent who isn't necessarily dead, but who is still around, but has never been there for you.
mm.
And reaching out to them one time to find out that they're no longer there for you, reaching out to them, hoping that they would show up, and they don't. So, that's a loss that people don't always talk about. Reaching out for someone who has never been there for you,
Mhm.
and you just want them to show up, and they don't. So there's some feelings that come along with that too, some sadness that comes along with that. And some of the things that people will experience is that they feel like they have to keep a tough upper lip,
Mm.
and they have to put on an Academy Award performance, which is one of the phrases that I absolutely love, for people that pretend to be okay with certain situations. And pretending to be okay is not being okay.
It's so good that you brought that up, because very often we do think about the loss of a parent being to death, but you're correct. In cases where a parent has not been there, has never been there, I've known people who had a parent who was never really there, was never really a part of their life, and then that parent dies. It's kind of like that parent died twice, right? Like, they never really knew them. And then there are people that I've known as well who, sort of toward the end of that parent's life, did form a connection. And then almost as soon as they finally formed a connection with them, then that parent dies. So, there are a few different scenarios where people can experience loss. And I think one of the things that's very intriguing to me about what you do is the way that you focus on loss. That, I think a lot of times people don't recognize um, certain things as loss. For example, being an empty nester. My husband and I are about to be empty nesters again, and the sense of loss that comes along with that. And I know that we're focusing on losing a parent tonight, but if you wouldn't mind just briefly touching on maybe a few of those 40 losses that you mentioned, because especially those that we might not necessarily think about as loss, but it's important for us to recognize them as loss, so that when certain feelings or emotions emerge in us about them, that we can recognize that, oh wait, I'm experiencing a loss here, and these emotions are quite normal.
Yes. So there's so many. Okay, so for example, you did touch on one, and that is becoming an empty nester, right? But also, when you think about being a parent, we all go through stages with our children. Um, and whether or not we were able to have children. And then even when you do have a child, for example, there have been some parents who become parents of special needs children who absolutely mourn the loss of their expectations of the child being different than the way that they are. So that's one loss. Another loss that can be and can seem simple, but isn't, is moving.
Mm.
A home actually has a vibe and a feel, and sometimes we're so well acquainted with the home that we can walk around in the dark, of course, perhaps even blindfolded, because we know the house so well. And we can rely on the house being the same over and over and over again. Well, if you were to lose your house for whatever reason, or lose the way that your house used to operate, if there's a flood and now you have to change something in the house, that's a feeling of loss too, because, oh, wow, it could have destroyed something that was really sentimental to you.
Yes.
So there's that. There's also loss of health. People don't realize that when you lose your capacity to operate in your body the way that you're used to operating, that there is some grieving that goes on when you're not able to operate the way that you used to. Also, this is one that it sometimes surprises people, but losing a job, losing money,
Mhm.
and also winning money. So
Mm.
winning the lottery can give you a grieving experience because it's a change in your normal pattern of behavior for living within your means at a different socioeconomic level. And then now having this influx of money, and what do you do with that? So that's something that I've been saying for years. And some people will say, oh, well, if I hit the lottery, I would never mourn being broke. I would never grieve not having money. But
Right.
sometimes you see people spending money at a rapid rate in order to get back to the feelings that they once had before. And they do this subconsciously. They're not aware that they're doing this, but getting themselves back to not having what they used to have. So there's that. There are intangible losses as well, loss of trust, loss of safety. We experienced some of that during the pandemic.
Mm.
So there are disenfranchised losses. Sometimes when we think about loss, for example, the loss of a former spouse, if you lost them to death,
Mhm.
and having some feelings surrounding that, and others being in judgment of whether or not you should have the right to mourn someone and you're no longer in relationship with them.
So as you're talking, it's making me think about sort of um, how loss can be intertwined because you can be experiencing for the death of a person, but then you're also experiencing the loss of the experiences that you had with the person, or or you're experiencing loss of trust, like loss of maybe having someone that you trust, like you trusted that person. Like there can be a lot of overlap, it sounds like, of these different types of losses that will impact how you might cope with the grief that comes along with the losses, if that
Yes.
makes sense.
Well, yeah, because it's compounded, right?
Yeah.
The loss of a father can be a loss of safety and security and protection and finances. Likewise, with the loss of a mother, absolutely all of those things for both. So not only are you missing the arms that held you, or that the hand that patted you on the back, or the smile that said good job, or even the look that said I wish you hadn't done that, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things, but speaking from a personal perspective, I can, talk about the physical loss of touch. My mom's hugs was something that was profound to me. It just put a smile on my heart.
Mhm.
If I wasn't so wrapped in her embrace where I could crack a smile, because anybody that knew my mom knew that she would just envelop you in her embrace. And she just had the best hugs in the world. And she had a big personality. And she loved to laugh, and she had a zest for life. And she actually is the only person that I've ever known, sadly, that did not want to die. Well,
Mm.
she's one of few, but she was the first person that I ever knew that actually said to me, Michelle, I do not want to die. And as you know, in my work as an end of life doula, I'm with people holding their hands and being with the family and the individual who is passing.
Mm.
So I've experienced a lot of people that have passed, but she was the first person that said, I don't want to die. So I said to her, well, what do you want to do? And she wanted to pay her bills, oddly enough. So I got her a clipboard and an ink pen, and she wanted to do that. But I miss that vigor
Yeah.
and that, huge personality that she had. And so when I think about that, the biggest strategy that I have for being able to overcome and handle, not necessarily overcome, but really handle the
Mhm.
pain that comes with that particular grief experience is that I have to understand realistically that no one physical body will ever live throughout eternity,
Right.
right? So, yeah, that's one thing that I had to really sit with
Mhm.
when we were experiencing the passing of our mother, me and my siblings. But just as she was my siblings' mom as well, she was my mom all by myself.
Mhm.
And the same as your mom was your mom all by herself, even though she had other children,
Yeah.
you know. So we get
Absolutely.
to hold on to those special feelings and experiences for the way that they parented us as unique individuals.
So one question that I had for you is about your relationship. We touched on it um earlier in the conversation, but maybe I don't know if you can dig a little bit deeper into the impact that one's relationship that they had with the parent has on how they cope with the grief process.
Yeah. Well, sometimes people hold on to the fact that they had undelivered communication
Mm.
with their loved one. And as managing director of some historic cemeteries, that was something that I noticed often with people coming back to the cemetery over and over again on a regular basis, just to spend time, in the same vicinity as their loved one's body. And being able to have that opportunity while the person is still living, and even if they've passed on, still being able to empty yourself of some of the things that you wish they had said to you or you had said to them, so that you can really unburden
Mm.
yourself, not forgive or forget, but really unburden yourself so that you can have that taken off of your shoulders. And the other things are things like forgiveness or unforgiveness
Mm.
and guilt, not living up to someone's expectations. And, that can go both ways. The child not living up to the parent's expectation, but also the parent not living up to the child's expectation as well. So those are some of the things. Yeah.
And how what are some ways that as you've worked with people over the years that may have had some of these situations where they feel some sort of guilt about what they said or didn't say. Somebody might think about, oh, the last words I said to my loved one was, not were not good. Um, get through that? Like, how do you really pour that pour that out? How do you get through that?
Yeah. One of the things that's important, I believe, is understanding that we are imperfect beings. Our parents were imperfect beings, human beings, so they were human. And, not unlike the situation that one would sit in after experiencing the loss of their parent likewise, 9 times out of 10, sat in that same space of experiencing the passing of their parent. So, as an imperfect human being, learning from imperfect human beings, being able to sit in a place of reality and understand that no one is perfect. You are not perfect. They are not perfect. They weren't perfect. They were human, and they were being human the entire time that they were. And you likewise are always being human. So being able to cut yourself some slack sometimes, cut yourself some slack, be just as kind to yourself as you would to a friend who is in your situation.
Mhm.
Understanding that the same things that you would say to a friend, it's important to say to yourself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Give yourself some grace. I always talk about how, when I became an adult, at some point, I don't remember exactly at what point I realized that my parents were human. Because as a young child, you sort of, your parents seem like these great big forces of something.
Mhm.
It's like you sort of look at them as almost like superhuman or something.
Mhm.
And but at some point, you get to a place in life where you sort of realize, they actually were human. And, in some cases, they may have done the best that they could with whatever it was that they had. And just trying to extend them some grace and extend yourself some grace, as you were just saying, for some feelings that you might have had about your relationship with them, and things that may have, whether they were good things, but if things were strained, or even if you're estranged, letting yourself feel those feelings. And so I think a strategy for me with my parents now, I have one parent that my mom just passed a few months ago. My dad passed almost 20 years ago. I can't tell the difference, right? I mean, I still have moments, even with, my dad being gone almost 20 years, I still have those feelings sometimes where I just cry. I tell people I can't listen to the song Dance with My Father by Luther Vandross and not come to tears, because that was one of my favorite things to do with my dad, was to dance. Um, and so I always tell people that to allow yourself to lean into those feelings when you feel them, and to not let people say things like, well, just get over it. Oh, it's been 20 years. What are you still crying about? Well, that I still feel it, so would you agree with that? Or do you feel like there's ever a point where people should feel like they should be at a certain place, where they can almost, just kind of forget, or just wash it away?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And there's something about today's society that makes the assumption that we are not supposed to feel things, you know? So can you imagine being sad and someone telling you to not feel sad, to not feel bad at all, right? If
Right.
you were happy and someone said to you, do not be happy, why are you smiling? Why are you laughing? It's
Mm,
exactly the same thing. So
right.
when it comes to time, time does not heal wounds,
Mm,
right? Actions do. So time does not heal wounds. And I like to equate that to a broken arm. So if you have a broken heart because your dad passed, your mom passed, if you had a broken arm and you never got that healed properly, it would still be that you would walk around not fully put together the way that you were before.
yes.
So there are some myths that come with grief, and you definitely hit on one. Time. Time does not heal wounds.
No.
Um, I hit on another one. Don't feel bad. People will tell you, don't feel bad. He or she is in a better place. Well, I do feel bad. So how can you tell me not to feel bad? I
Right.
already do. Another one would be replace the loss. Well, why don't you get a spiritual mom? You have your aunts, you have your uncles, you have, you know, elderly people that you could spend time with, older people that you could spend time with. You can get a play mom. You can get, so that does not help. Replacing the loss does not help because that specific individual is the one that you're grieving.
Yes.
And speaking of grieving, grieve alone. That's the biggest one that really chaps me because in today's society, nobody wants to their real feelings. And people feel like if I tell you how I truly feel, it's going to make you feel uncomfortable.
Mm,
So I'm going to just say that I'm fine. I'm going to have a stiff upper lip. I'm not going to cry when I really want to or feel down when I really want to. It's Mother's Day or it's Father's Day. And my girlfriend, who is the same age as me, who may be 50 or 60 years old, still has her mom.
yes.
And I'm supposed to grieve alone and not say how I truly feel, and then, you know, not be understood. So sometimes someone will say, well, you know, like we learned that when we were young. If you're going to cry, go to your room.
Mm,
Like hide your feelings, go be somewhere else, or turn your head, go to the bathroom, go to a quiet place, but don't ask me, you know, don't ask so and so how he's doing because he just lost his mom. So now nobody's asking you how you're doing, where you can give them the truth and tell them how you're doing. Today was really difficult. I wanted pancakes, and my mom used to always make me pancakes. And I know I'm 45 years old, but I still had a taste for pancakes, and I think about my mom's pancakes,
yes.
and it made me feel down.
It's amazing the things that we might think of as small, but that really makes you think about, a loved one that you may have lost. The
Mhm.
the the favorite foods that they would cook, their home, their disposition. I can't see. I have a butterfly ring on that my dad gave me for my 21st birthday, because he loved butterflies. He liked the story of the butterfly going from a caterpillar to spreading its wings and being able to fly. So I can't see butterflies and not think about my dad. So it's like some of those little things that you think about. And as you were talking, I also started thinking about how sometimes we might compare our grief and loss with that of someone else, or we might feel bad that we see somebody, when I see people that still have their parents and their parents are in good health and their parents are able to go places and do things. And, inside I might feel like, man, I wish I could have still had my parents now. Um, and even when we talk about, you talked a little bit ago about the loss of someone having a special needs child, and
Mhm.
someone in the chat said that that they were grieving their special needs child, and them losing their abilities. So in a case like that, that you might look at other people with their children, who don't, have different abilities, and who, are sort of progressing as medicine says that they should, and feel a sense of, why couldn't that be my child? And so what do you say to those types of situations where your loss sort of makes you almost envy, someone else's not having lost in that same way?
Mhm. Well, I would say to that there are different ways of framing your life and designing your life based on what you have and based on reality, and giving space and remembering, first of all, that we're always emitting and receiving. We're always emitting and receiving as, physical bodies and human vessels. We're always emitting and receiving. And the way that we can look at a situation that is not what we would have maybe chosen, but we actually have, is to truly look at what is positive and true about any given situation.
Mhm,
Having a child is a gift for sure.
mhm,
And being able to really focus on staying in the moment, in based in your reality with exactly what it is that you have, being constructive, being still when you have to, leaning to optimism, trusting your faith, but also doing things that encourage your situation to be even bigger and more full. And yeah, focusing on what is positive and true, I think is so important. And emotionally regulating, right? So emotionally regulating yourself when you feel out of body, when you feel in your head,
mm.
when you feel like your awareness really needs to be brought back to the reality of your situation. Because anytime you're focused on what isn't, that's not that's not a place where you want to be. That's actually a place of dishonesty.
What does that look like? What does emotional regulation look like?
It looks like being mindful and being present with what your reality is,
Mm,
bringing your awareness to your emotions. Like right now, I'm feeling whatever feelings you're having, envy, you know, um, sadness, and not being distracted, but really focusing in on what is not, well, what could be exaggerated in the way of emotions at that time or thoughts at that time, feelings of helplessness.
mm,
And then being able to come back to yourself to say, you know, um, I have to focus on what is true in this situation. I have, for example, a 5-year-old that isn't able to do this, but can do this.
mm.
And so when we focus on what is positive and true and what they can do, and holding space for gratitude in every moment for blessings that appear as challenges. And we know that sometimes that really happens, and that happens to be one of the biggest life lessons that we can learn. Um, when something looks one way, but the reality is that it was there for another reason, to show us a different way of living and to expand ourselves.
Somebody mentioned that they have some trauma that they've been going through, and people tell them to get over it, and it makes them shut down. What advice do you have for people as far as how to respond to when someone says just get over it?
Yeah. To let them know that trauma causes us to hold a lot of stuff, right? And it requires a lot of us when we're holding all of that stuff. And separating yourself from people that are not helpful and that don't say things that lift you up and encourage you. Even though it may be someone that may be close to you, it very well may be that you need to limit your time with that individual when you're focused on talking about some of the things that are near and dear to your heart. If someone isn't there to support you, then find people and surround yourself with people that are there to support you.
That's
Yeah.
that's good advice. That really it upsets me
Mhm.
when people have that sort of attitude of that flippant sort of just get over it. It's been however long or whatever the case might be. But it's important for us people to recognize and that what might seem like it's not seem unimportant to us, if it's important to that person, then it's important.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we should, allow them to go through the things that they need to go through to try to navigate, getting through the pain of a situation. And
Certainly. And can I say one thing? Forgive me for interrupting, but the reality is that nothing in life is ever forgotten. Nothing is forgotten. The smell of your dad's cologne, and
Mhm,
the way that your kitchen looked when you were 8 years old,
mhm,
you, your first bicycle, or your graduation. Nothing is ever forgotten. The way that someone made you feel once when you were perhaps 5 years old,
mhm.
in whatever situation, someone looking down at you and smiling, someone shaking your hand. Nothing is ever forgotten. And there are good things that have happened to us that are never forgotten, and not so good things that have happened to us in our life that will never be forgotten. And it's impossible to forget those things. You could not try. It's impossible to forget things. If I took you on a journey of your compounded grief and your grief history, taking you all the way back to the dawn of your earliest memory, and whatever that would be. One person remembered being in a crib, and then thinking about all of the things that have happened, perhaps even in high school, rejection. Nothing is ever forgotten. Traumas most certainly are never forgotten. So surround yourself with people that are there to, you know, hold your heart in their hands and really love you authentically and truly.
Yeah. And in cases where people feel like they just don't have that, um, I don't know, maybe try to seek that out intentionally. I don't know. You know, so there are people that might say, I just don't have that.
Mhm.
I don't have that kind of support network. I mentioned in a previous Mind the Mental about being, intentionally leaning into your village. Making sure you have that village and surround yourself. Um, and there were some who just felt like they don't have that. that kind of support from anyone. So it can be a difficult task. Uh,
Yeah.
but even when people are telling you to get over it, try not to allow other people to shut you down.
Mhm.
You are a voice that is worthy to be heard. Your feelings are valid, no matter how long you have felt that way. Your feelings are valid, and be sure that you um, tell yourself that, affirm yourself in that, so that when others say just get over it, you're able to say, I'm not getting over it, but day by day, one day at a time, one step at a time, I'm walking it out, and I will get through, and I will develop ways to cope. So so I know that we are, ooh, it's so good that we're already 8:47. So we might run just a little bit longer. I just have a couple more questions that I want to get through, and so that we'll end in a few minutes. But what might be some strategies that one can use to handle grief, even if it's been a few years,
Yeah.
to sort of cope with the grief of losing a parent?
Mhm. Well, I would say first, remember that your energy changes your environment,
Mm,
right? And being able to self-regulate through a body-centered perspective, focusing really on what's going on inside of your mind and your body, being still, being able to perceive where your attention is being drawn. Like, are you having heart palpitations? Is your mind racing? Do you feel nervous in your hands? Really focusing on that, because those are signs of stress that can, have other effects on your body. And then being able to calm yourself, being able to decompress, being able to be your own safety net for when things start to feel like they're spiraling.
mm.
So whatever self-care looks like to you, whether it's a cup of tea and reading a nice book, or whether it's taking a walk, but really focusing on what you need in that time. And then also doing an environmental scan, right? If you have people around you that you don't particularly care for, be focusing on giving yourself what you need in that space. So do you need to have self-management in a way that parcels out time for specific people in your life to say, I love this person, they're an important part of my life, but I can only do like 15 minutes to a half hour, and then I got to get out of there, you know?
If you all know
And
people,
I've
we all know
got people like
somebody
that in
that
my
we.
life. And then use value-centered communication, like Benita, like you just said, what you can do, what you can't do, and who you can be around and who you can't be around. But really focusing on that, allowing other people likewise to have their space. Because when we're dealing with the loss of a parent, some of us have siblings.
Mhm.
And when we're looking at one person or two people, our parents, these people have different lives that they've lived. And have you ever had this experience where your loved one was just the cream of the crop to neighbors, to other family members, to friends? And then for you, you were just like, well, that wasn't my experience with my loved one at all. Like, who were they talking about?
Like, you
And
really don't know.
so coping with the loss of a parent is just like, there's so many moving parts,
Yes.
and being able to say to yourself, well, constructively, to yourself and to other people, I want you to have a healthy expression of your truth, And I want to be able to have a healthy expression of my truth without you changing my truth and without me changing yours, right?
Mhm.
And understanding too that when you do have siblings, their experience with their mother, who is also your mother,
Right,
could very well and must be different because you're different people.
right. Absolutely. Well, lastly, before we close out, I want to ask you about legacy and hope. Tell us, what the backstory, how did you come to develop Legacy and Hope LLC, and what do you do there?
Well, like you said in my intro, it is a boutique company that helps people with grief and loss and end of life care. And so there, I decided to start Legacy and Hope because I was done working in corporate America. I had already enjoyed my career in corporate America, but at this stage in my life, I wanted to just take the parts of my jobs that I enjoyed and create my own company just with the stuff that I appreciated being able to do, right? So we all know that
Oh
there's
yeah.
parts of our jobs we like and parts that we
Right.
don't like. So I just took the parts that really spoke to my soul
Mm.
and put them all together and offer them to people nationally and internationally to be able to find some measure of peace and peace of mind more than anything else in their day-to-day experiences, whether it's because they've experienced the loss of a loved one or they're trying to manage their way through a grief journey.
Okay. And so how can people connect with you if they desire to utilize any of your services?
Yes, they can look at my website. It's legacyandhope.com, and they can give me a call at 267-225-2280. Yes, I'm someone who takes phone calls and appreciates having a phone call and a conversation with people. And you can also email me at my name, Michelle Thornhill at legacyandhope.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this discussion tonight. I hope that those of you who are tuning in now live and those that will tune in later really was able to get some nuggets from this conversation. I do want to also, I have a bit of an announcement tonight. So I want you to save this date, November 4th, 2023. I am reintroducing my book, The Scream Within, because I did not really do a book launch when it actually came out. And there's so many people that haven't had an opportunity to read it yet or to talk about it yet. So I am doing a free virtual event on November 4th from 5 to 7 Eastern Standard Time. Save the date. I will be talking about the book, The Scream Within, Mental Health and Clergy Marriages, Journey of a Pastor's Spouse. It is my personal story of being the spouse of a pastor who battles depression and sort of our family and some of the things that we were able to kind of navigate through in that space. And so I'm looking forward to that. I'm excited about the reintroduction of the book and having a conversation about it. So save the date and you'll be hearing more about it in the near future. I want to thank each of you for tuning in tonight. Tune in next week, next Monday, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Facebook Live. And thank you, Michelle Thornhill, for gracing my page today. And I hope that you all really gained a lot of beneficial information from it. God bless each of you, and we'll see you next week.